Hey everybody, Max Rich here, and today I want to tell you some cool ways that you can change and alter and soup up your dominant 7 chords. It's going to be very, very simple, and it relies on simply moving one note within the chord, a half step this direction or a half step that direction. So what you heard me playing, I was just kind of improvising and messing around on 2 chords. I was playing over an A7 and a D7. So the chords I was thinking of was A7 and D7. But yet I was playing all these crazy chord shapes and very different sounds, and I was getting chord melodies and things like that. I was doing that through the use of extensions and alterations. And so basically we're going to talk about this today. So the first thing I'd like to do is talk about an A7 chord. And basically what comprises an A7 chord? Well, it's a 1, 3, 5, and flat 7. And that's essentially true for all dominant 7 chords. They are all built on the 1, 3, 5, and flat 7. But we're going to take A7 in particular. So if you take the standard bar chord shape for an A7 that pretty much everyone knows, it's a 6-string version. We're going to chop that down to a 4-string version. So we are playing A here on the low E string, and then we're going to actually skip the 5th string entirely. We're not even going to play the 5th string. Then we're going to jump to basically the next 3 strings, the D, G, and B strings, right? We're going to keep those along with the low E. So we're going to get rid of the A string and we're going to get rid of the high E string. Now it doesn't make much sense to continue playing it this way, although you can. It's not bad, but if you are playing with a pick and you go to strike that, you're going to play 6 notes instead of the 4 that we're looking for. So to eliminate that problem, you could do one of 2 things. You can play those 4 notes using this shape, which is essentially the same thing, except like I said, you're cutting out the A string and the high E. Or you could play it like this, right, where your thumb is playing the low string, we're skipping the A string and then playing D string, G string, B string, right? However you do it, those are the 4 notes that we want. Now, what we're going to do to alter this A7 chord is we're going to be moving the 5th of this we're going to move it up a half step, down a half step, and we're going to be moving it in different directions to create new harmonies, right? Essentially altered chords. And this can get very deep. We're just basically going to go through some chord shapes that you can start using today immediately. So if this is your chord shape, right, and you mapped out each note in this chord, right, you would have A as the bass note, and then you would have G, and then C sharp, and then E. Numerically, that's the 1, the 7, the 3, and the 5. So it's the 5 that we're going to be moving around here with this A7 chord, right? So the very first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take this 7, and we're going to take the 5, this E, and we're going to play something called an A7 flat 5. And that's basically exactly what it sounds like. We're going to take this 5 and we're going to flatten it right there. So now we're going to be playing the same 3 lower notes, but we're going to be playing an E flat instead of an E natural. So now we're playing A, G, C, and C sharp and E flat. So that's 1, flat 7, 3, flat 5. So listen to the tonal difference between a dominant 7 flat 5 chord and a regular dominant 7. It's quite a difference. Now you could go in the opposite direction as well, and you could play something called a sharp 5 chord, where you take this E and you sharpen it, and you just go up a half step, and the low 3 notes remain the same. So now you have A, G, C sharp, and E sharp. I know it's technically an F, right? But we're thinking about it in terms of the 5. So we're talking about a sharp 5. Since 5 is E in this case, it's an E sharp. A sharp 5, a sharp E is an E sharp, right? Even though it's an F. But like the theory, it's great if you know it. It's not the end of the world if you don't, because you can still implement this stuff, right? So we'll get to that. But for now, you have a flat 5 chord, dominant 7 flat 5, and then you have a dominant 7 sharp 5. And the only thing that's changing is that you're moving this top note either down a half step or up a whole half step, right? And then from there, if we move that pinky up one more half step, we would be on F sharp. And we would then be playing something called an A13 chord, okay? And the reason it's called an A13 chord is if you stacked odd numbers on top of each other, you would eventually get to 13. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13. That 13, which is the same as a 6, in this key is F sharp, right? So that's the F sharp. We're adding the 13 to our A dominant 7 chord, which makes it, I mean, you could call it an A7 add 13, but for shorthand, people just call it an A13, right? So, and then if we moved it up one more half step, we would be at the G, which is already in our chord. So we're just still playing an A7 chord, right? So essentially, on this B string, you have a bunch of different notes that are all a half step away from each other that will give you different chord qualities with the underlying A7 harmony remaining the same. So you have your A7, then you have your A7 flat 5, then you have your A7 sharp 5, then you have your A13. And the low 3 notes are staying the same every time. It's only the B string that's moving, right? And so like a really useful thing that you can do, let's say you just want to implement this right now today and you're playing over an A7 chord, instead of playing your A7 chord this way, right? You could think about it, I mean, if you're playing with fingers, it's easier because you can avoid hitting the A string and the high E string, right? But if you're playing with a pick, you've got to kind of refinger it so that you can swipe at all the notes and, you know, not play the A string or the E string. But in any case, you can basically play and you can have like this moving melody on top of your chords. Right? Now, it's not like the greatest melody because you're only moving in half steps, but as you saw in the beginning, I was doing that times 10, you know, like doing that idea, but all over the neck, and I was doing it over 2 different chords, right? So if you're playing like a blues, let's say, right? Let's say you're going to be playing, I don't know, just like a regular old blues progression. Right, so what you heard me do, I played an A13 in there, right? I was playing my normal blues kind of groove. And then I play a 13. It adds a nice color, it adds something totally different. I could do the same thing with a sharp 5. Right? I could do the same thing with a flat 5. Right? And you can do this immediately, right? Now, you have to sort of watch out a little bit because depending on what you're playing and who you're playing with, you know, maybe the singer or the melody, the soloist, whoever is playing that natural 5 and you want to play a flat 5. That's going to clash, right? So you got to kind of be a little bit wary as to like is that natural 5 occurring anywhere else in the melody? Because if it is, maybe I shouldn't mess with it, right? But if it's not, you know, you can get quite a bit of color simply by moving that B string a half step down, a half step up, a whole step up, right? So there's your normal A7 chord, right? Once again, and then move that B string down a half step, gives you a flat 5, dominant 7 flat 5. Moving it up a half step gives you a sharp 5. Moving it up another half step gives you an A13 chord. All of that can be very, very useful. Now, if we were to like put this dominant 7 flat 5 example into practice, right? We could do so with a series of like a couple simple chords. Let's change keys, keep things interesting. Let's start on a B minor 7 chord. And then we're gonna go to an A flat major 7 chord. So it's like a 2 to 1. Like that. Now if we're paying attention to our melody's on the B string. And then, right like that, okay? So now what we're gonna do, we're basically gonna play this B flat minor, and then we're gonna transition to an A7 flat 5 before going to our A flat major 7. And this is what it's gonna sound like. Right? It's a super nice way to transition. It's much better than just jumping from the B flat minor 7 to the A flat major 7. There's like a little movement in there, right? And it kind of sounds like a 2-5-1. And if you're like pretty advanced in theory, you can understand that it is essentially a 2-5-1 tritone substitution, but I don't want to get into all that because we're sticking with how to practically include this today. So you could do this anywhere. You could take it, the same chord progression, you could go from A minor to G major, and you could literally do the same thing. Right? It's a real simple way of transitioning between two chords, especially when the higher note is on the B string and that's moving down to your next chord. If I play that transition chord, like if I'm doing this here, A minor, and then I play this like A flat 7 flat 5, that flat 5 of that A flat 7 chord is the top note of my next chord, which is G major 7, right? The top note is E, and then the A flat 7 flat 5. The top note is D, and then my G major 7, top note is D. So including these can be done really easily. You can, like I said, you can move this, you can use a sharp 5 the same way, right? If we go back to our B flat minor example. It's just a simple chromatic way of moving down to the next chord, but using a dominant 7, an altered dominant 7 in between, and it's altered because we've changed the 5. So you can use a flat 5, you can use a sharp 5, you can even essentially use an A13 as a transition chord. Right? For me, that's not my favorite. I prefer either the sharp 5 or the flat 5, but you be the judge. Essentially, you can incorporate this stuff as you wish, wherever you'd like. Okay, so we've gotten through dominant 7 chords that are rooted on the 6th string, right? But you also play dominant 7 chords that are rooted on the A string, right? Like one of the most common chords to play is like an E7, and you play it like this, right? And the exact same thing that was done over the A7 chord can be done over the E7, but it yields a different result. You can move that B string up in half steps and it'll change the quality, the like altered quality of that E7 chord, right? Now, before we do that, I want to talk about extensions, right? I hinted at it a little bit. An extension is basically when you add something greater than like the 7 to a chord, right? So normally in this dominant 7 chords, like I said, you have 1, 3, 5, and flat 7. If you added a 9, that 9 would be an extension, right? And like an E9 is a really common chord. Right? That's like a super common, happens in funk, happens in blues, you know, you hear it all the time. Right? Like that E9 is really common. I'm sure you all have played it before. Now, you know the E9 and you know the E7, right? And they're essentially the lower 3 notes are the same. That's 1, 3, 7. 1, 3, 7. It's the same lower 3 notes, just as in the previous example, the lower 3 notes were the same and that high B string was changing. We're going to do the exact same thing here. So if we take this E7 chord and we take this index finger and we move it up a half step, we're playing an F, and that creates an E7 flat 9. Now this is kind of an awkward fingering. Personally, I prefer to finger it like this. It's the same way I would finger maybe a 9 chord, but barring my first finger. So I play 7, 6, 7, 6. That gives me an E7 flat 9 chord. And then if I move that B string up a half step, well, I'd be at my E9. Here's my E9, here's my E flat 9. 9, flat 9. And then what happens if I move that B string up another half step? Well, then I have an E7 sharp 9, right? So I have, once again, 4 chromatic notes in a row, 2 of which are kind of standard, your E7 and then your E9. But the other 2 that aren't so common, the flat 9 and the sharp 9. Now you might be familiar with this sharp 9. People call it the Hendrix chord. It's a really, really common chord. You can think about it. I mean, it's not in this key, but everyone plays it in this key, Foxy Lady. Right? Or, what is that? I think Mary Had a Little Lamb. Right? Stevie Ray Vaughan. This dominant 7 sharp 9 is a very, very, very common chord. And the dominant 7 flat 9, slightly less common, right? But an interesting thing with a dominant 7 flat 9, if I were to play that flat 9, and then I add the B with my pinky to the top of the chord, so I'm essentially playing 1, 3, 7, flat 9, and 5. Right, so I have all my 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, right, except I've got a flat 9 in there. And then if I take a look at these top 4 strings, I have a diminished 7 chord, right? We're breaching some very serious like theory territory, right? This is another rabbit hole we can go down. We're not going to go too far down it. But essentially, diminished 7 chords are movable. They're symmetrical. You can move them up 3 frets at a time and they stay the same notes. So these 4 notes, right? G sharp, D, F, B. If I move that up 3 frets, B, F, G sharp, D. If I move it up another 3 frets, D, G sharp, B, F. Move it up another 3 frets, F, B, D, G sharp. And all of that, if I play an E bass note over all of that, all of that can be considered an E7 flat 9, right? The versatility of a dominant 7 flat 9 chord is insane. You can use it all over the place for a ton of different purposes, right? And the way I'm getting that is by playing this, basically a dominant 9, and I'm just flatting that B string. Right? So if I put this into practice and I like wanted to play, say, like a blues groove or something, and I was gonna play the E7, you know, if I'm playing like a blues in B, let's say, right? And then I get to the E chord. Right? So I play that E7 chord, and I built that diminished 7 run up in 3 frets at a time. All of that happening over an E bass, it creates this dominant 7 flat 9 sound that I could move all over the place, build up a ton of tension, and then bring back to the 1 chord. Right? That's way cooler than just going to the E7 and staying there. You know, like, that's just way better than this. That's fine. But listen to this. Right? That one, it builds and grows and has a lot more musicality to it, right? That's part of the benefit of dominant 7 flat 9 chord, is that they're essentially the same thing as diminished 7 chords. Now, so we have E7, E7 flat 9, E9, and then E7 sharp 9. Now you, like I said, you're probably familiar with this dominant 7 sharp 9, right? But you can use it in a ton of different ways, right? So another way might be something like right? So I was just kind of messing around. That's, you know, like sort of like a, I don't know, a funk groove maybe or something, but I was using this E7 sharp 9, and then I moved it to a B7 sharp 9, right? It's just a very common thing that you can do. And when you combine all of these options, right? Sharp 9, 9, flat 9, 7. You can essentially say like, oh, I'm gonna play over an E7 chord. I can move that note up or down and create movement in my playing. Is just essentially an E7 chord with little color tones added. The same thing that I was doing to my A7, right? I was just moving the 5 up and down instead of moving the 9 up and down. So if I combine those ideas, I can get a lot of movement out of 2 chords. If I'm going to play E7 to A7, and I'm going to go bounce back and forth, right? You could do a ton of stuff and make a lot of movement happening while you're maintaining the lower portion of the harmony, right? It's insanely useful, right? And it may seem like super daunting and all this, and understanding the theory behind it, that's another thing, right? But I would like you to, if you are interested in this and you do want to understand the theory a bit more, and you're not quite sure, please send me an email or a DM or whatever. Like, I answer everyone who responds to me, right? I'm happy to help you out, kind of explain it further. Alternately, you can check out my website, maxrichmusic.com, and check out the newsletter, maxrichmusic.com/newsletter. And there are a bunch of articles there that explain dominant 7 theory, extensions, alterations, things like that. That is a great resource for anyone who wants quick answers and who doesn't want to send me an email. So, and if you are feeling so inclined, please head over there and subscribe to the newsletter, because you get free weekly updates and free weekly articles, lessons, song lessons, technique, theory stuff, straight to your inbox from me. And like I said, I am always available for questions, comments, whatever you guys are wondering about. And if you like this video, please share, subscribe, that sort of thing. Helps me out, helps me create content and keep it free for all you guys. So in any case, thanks for watching and enjoy.